In 1700, one nation generated nearly a quarter of the entire planet's wealth. But just 2 centuries later, that share had collapsed to almost nothing. Where did it all go? This is the story of how a civilization of immense riches was systematically emptied. Not by an invasion of soldiers, but by an invasion of balance sheets. Welcome to Finance Roots, where we unearth the true stories behind power. For 200 years, the British Empire perfected a financial machine of staggering efficiency. They didn't just occupy this land, they monetized its very soul. A society that once sold luxury textiles to ancient Rome and China was forcibly transformed into a source of cheap raw materials. And the key instrument of this transformation? Accounting. This isn't a tale of simple plunder. It's a story of financial architecture. How does one of Earth's wealthiest cultures become one of its poorest? Not by chance, but by economic design. Hay conquered with ledgers, not just legions. To understand, we must journey back to the powerful Mughal Empire. In the 1600s, this was a sophisticated realm of nearly 150 million people. Its agriculture flourished, its ports teemed with ships, and its textiles were coveted across Europe. Indian spices, silks, and jewels created a massive trade surplus. Precious metals flowed in, not out. This was an economic powerhouse, but a new kind of threat was rising across the ocean. A private corporation, armed with a royal charter and an army. The East India Company. Their innovation wasn't just in trade, but in high finance, bonds, insurance, and credit networks that allowed for unprecedented scale. They soon realized a profound truth. The real money wasn't in commerce, it was in collecting taxes. The turning point was the Battle of Plassey in 1757. A small force, with local allies, defeated the Nawab of Bengal. The true victory, however, was financial. The company installed a puppet and seized the right to collect the region's taxes. Corporate colonialism was born. What followed was a torrent of wealth siphoned from Bengal to London. A transfer so vast it triggered hyperinflation and catastrophic famine. As London's investors grew rich from dividends, millions in Bengal starved. The company had become a state unto itself, with its own currency, laws, and military. When the Great Famine of 1770 struck, killing an estimated 10 million, the company's revenues somehow increased. Tax collection continued. Grain exports continued. In the ledgers of London, it was simply a profitable year. The market had triumphed over morality. Famine became a line item on a balance sheet. British economists of the era justified this as a civilizing mission. They spoke of railways, law, and education. But each improvement was engineered for a single purpose: extraction. Railways connected cotton fields to ports, not cities to each other. Schools trained clerks for the colonial bureaucracy. The courts protected British debt, not Indian rights. Even the railways, often portrayed as a gift, were a financial trap. British investors were guaranteed a 5% return, paid for by Indian taxes. The profits were private. The risks were public. This was the vampire economy, draining a nation without a single visible wound. The mechanism was so effective, it earned a name: the drain of wealth. Indian intellectual. Dadabhai Naoroji calculated that by the late 1800s, India was being bled of hundreds of millions of pounds annually, capital that fueled Britain's industrial revolution. Modern historians estimate the total extraction from 1765 to 1938 to be a staggering $45 trillion in today's currency. That is more than the current combined GDP of the United States and China. The human cost was catastrophic. India's economy was flipped inside out. It was forced to export raw cotton and opium and import finished British goods. The legendary weavers and artisans, once the backbone of a global luxury trade, were systematically erased by policy. Towns like Dhaka, famed for fabric, became ruins. British cloth flooded the markets at artificially low prices, destroying local competition. India went from the world's premier textile producer to a mere supplier of raw material for the factories of Manchester. This was globalization, 19th century style. Even after the British Crown took direct control following the 1857 rebellion, the financial machinery remained. The Raj refined the system into home charges, annual payments India was forced to make to Britain for so-called services. These were salaries for British officials, interest on London-held debt, and pensions for retired bureaucrats. It was an accounting trick, creating a perpetual outflow of value with nothing given in return. This system turned India into the empire's central bank. Indian revenues funded British wars in Afghanistan and Africa. Indian soldiers fought across the globe, their wages paid by Indian taxpayers. The empire truly ran on Indian rupees. And through a series of late 19th century famines that killed over 20 million, India was still a net exporter of food. Millions of tons of grain were shipped abroad as millions starved. A British official, Sir Richard Temple, argued against famine relief, fearing it would spoil the market. The ledger had become more sacred than life itself. When India finally gained independence in 1947, it inherited a shattered land. Centuries of extraction had left it with decimated industries, minimal literacy, and recurring famine. But the world it entered was still shaped by the same principles of unequal exchange. Today, the mechanisms have new names: debt dependency, structural adjustment, and austerity. The IMF and World Bank don't use armies, but their loan conditions often produce the same result: wealth flowing from the global south to the north. The direction of the drain hasn't changed. Only its methods have digitized. The empire collapsed, but its economic blueprint survives. The logic of extraction has simply evolved from gunpowder to contracts, from conquest to credit. India's story is the ultimate proof of this evolution. What Britain built there was the prototype for the modern global economy, a system where value flows upward, invisibly, through channels of trade and debt. But India endured. It rebuilt, nationalized its industries, and is now one of the world's fastest-growing economies. The scars remain, but the recovery is underway. This reveals a brutal arithmetic. Extraction is instant, but recovery takes centuries. The British didn't conquer India with armies. They conquered it with accountants. And the balance sheet opened in 1757 is still being settled today, under different names and with newer tools. History may not repeat, but the math always rhymes. If this story reshaped your understanding of global history, please support our channel. Give this video a like and subscribe to Finance Roots for more truths from the past.